Welcome to Your Next Best Chapter, a Central New Jersey divorce and family law podcast.
Welcome to Your Next Best Chapter, a Central New Jersey divorce and family law podcast with Laura M. D'Orsi. Laura is a highly respected divorce and family law attorney based in Red Bank, New Jersey, with more than 30 years of experience helping individuals and families navigate divorce, custody, alimony, and other complex family law matters. I'm Leanne Lyon, and in today's episode, Laura is going to help us pull back the curtain on both processes, dispelling the myths and highlighting the practicalities of each path. It's great to see you again, Laura.
Yes, you too.
So, Laura, for somebody who just realized that their marriage is over, how do you simply explain the fundamental difference between the adversarial nature of litigation and the collaborative nature of mediation?
So when you start with a litigated divorce, the process usually begins by filing a complaint for divorce in the courts. And so then you are in the court system and you have to comply with all the deadlines that the court imposes, and you're on their deadline system as well, not really your own deadline system. So when you are part of that system, when there are different court appearances required, they have to be complied with. When certain documents are required to be filed with the court, you have to comply with all of that.
Mm-hmm.
With mediation, it's sometimes more on your own time frame. If people are interested in mediation, first of all, if someone comes to me and says they want mediation and they want me to be their mediator, I will not be representing either party. I would then advise them both to seek counsel so that they can obtain legal advice from their own counsel. In mediation, we work with the couples to try to help them reach an agreement before filing for divorce in most cases. And in those scenarios, I've been a mediator. I've also represented people who are going through mediation, and then I am basically like their consult attorney throughout their mediation, and then also review attorney when the mediator finally comes up with a draft agreement or what we would call a memorandum of understanding. And then we would incorporate that memorandum of understanding into a final agreement. So, it's really just two different processes. I mean, in some cases, bad things can happen in both. In mediation, sometimes people attend mediation for a really long time and they never reach an agreement. So then they kind of have to go the other route. And then they might feel like they wasted time in mediation. In other situations, individuals might be very efficient. They may be aware of all their assets and the income and their budgets, and they may be ready to make an agreement rather quickly. And then also in the litigation process, sometimes things can move along very quickly if, again, the parties are very familiar with everything and kind of want to reach a resolution. So both systems are fine. It really is a preference as to what the individual wants.
Are there any specific New Jersey court mandates or trends maybe that make mediation a more attractive or even necessary option today than it was a decade ago?
I think mediation is now more accepted. Also, it is part of the court process. So you can see that the courts believe it can be helpful. One of the first things, if people have children, they are actually required to attend custody and parenting mediation through the court system, where an employee of the court will sit down with them. It used to be in person, but it is now usually virtually through Zoom. And these individuals will help them come up with a parenting schedule, help them come up with like a holiday schedule for the children. And they'll talk about, what is usually best for kids. For some people, it doesn't really work, but most people are pretty successful with that process with the court system, and that doesn't cost them any money. It's just the two individuals, the attorneys are not involved, and it is just the court employee. So it can be a pretty efficient process for people. Additionally, later on in a litigated divorce case, the court mandates that every couple attend what's called economic mediation. And again, this is mediation that is supported by the court. And there are individuals on a list with the court, and they basically give every couple 2 free hours of mediation. The first session, the first hour is usually when the attorney who is going to work as the mediator reviews information that the attorneys provide, kind of providing like a summary of what is happening in this case, providing perhaps an appraisal of a home or the financial documents and a summary of the issues that are outstanding. And then the first real hour of mediation is complimentary. And then after that, the individuals do have to pay for the services of the mediator going forward. But I would say that that's a good example of how the court system is using mediation to help try resolve litigated cases.
Excellent. Well, you mentioned price, and we often hear that mediation is cheaper. In your 30 years of experience, what is the typical price tag difference between a mediated divorce and a litigated one?
Yeah, I don't think I could give that. I mean, again, it always depends because people will say, how long will this take and how much is it? But it depends on the people. If the people communicate with each other without the presence of attorneys and accountants and mediators and share their financial information, and both of the parties are comfortable with being aware of what the assets are and what the incomes are and what the liabilities are, that can help save a lot of money because then you don't have the attorney or the mediator asking for that information. Again, just the more forthcoming people can be when the experts are not present can really help to save money. I mean, I've had mediated cases where the parties can come to mediation for 4 or 5 sessions and they're not successful. Or I've also had litigated divorces where the parties on the first day say, this is the agreement that we want. And so sometimes litigation can be less expensive than mediation. Again, it just depends on the people and how cooperative they want to be with each other, how forthcoming they want to be about their finances and accounts, and promptly providing that information. Because it's best if you can do all of those things, exchange information when you're not paying attorneys close to $1,000 an hour to get that information for you.
Absolutely. So, how does the choice then between litigation and mediation typically impact the long-term co-parenting relationship?
Well, I think if the parties are able to, like I said, in the court system, they actually are using mediation to help parties come up with a parenting agreement.
Mhm.
But again, and I think I've talked about this in other episodes, the parents are really the people who know their children best. They know if a particular child needs extra help in math or if maybe a child is attending therapy on a particular day of the week. So if the parents are able to come up with that schedule on their own and really take into account the needs of their children and the things that their children are involved in and um, really work together in coming up with those schedules, that is going to be much more helpful than people going to court and fighting over what a particular schedule could be, because a judge is just going to impose a schedule. They're not going to care that you work from home on Wednesday and you're available to drive your child to CCD on that day. They're just going to come up with a schedule because they have so many cases to deal with. They're not going to be able to give that individual attention to your case. And I also think that sometimes people think, oh, because I was always home with the children and the other person works in the city and I'm going to get all the time with the children, but the judge is really going to have to be fair because, again, this is a court of equity. So you're not going to win everything that you want with the court. And so I think sometimes you're better if you can, some people you cannot negotiate with and you cannot communicate with. But I think usually most people put aside their differences when it comes to their kids and they try to do what is in the best interest of their children. And I think that's always better to do by way of agreement, either, through mediation or through just putting that through as a coming up with an agreement on that particular issue.
So, what is bird nesting, and can mediation still work if there's significant disagreement?
Well, bird nesting, I think we usually just call in New Jersey, we call it nesting. And that's a situation where, again, the judge would never impose this. This is something people would have to agree to because only very special people could agree with this sort of situation. And that is a situation where the children stay in the home and both parties or the parties together get like a one-bedroom apartment. And so the parents are the ones who kind of leave the children in the home, and then the parents go and stay at this one-bedroom apartment based on a particular parenting schedule. So like I said, it has to be very special people that would come up with something like that because most people don't want to do that. They also might feel like they'll have no privacy anywhere because, when they stay in the home, the other party can look at whatever they've left there. And then if they have this one-bedroom apartment that they share, they're not going to have any privacy there. So it's very special people that I think could come up with that. I don't even think, maybe I've had a few cases where people have done that, but most people just cannot do that. And, those that can are you really have to give them a lot of credit because they're really putting their children ahead of all of their own needs. And a judge would never order that people do that. So it has to be something that the people want to do. And usually, and that might be through mediation that they come up with that. And then they actually might have to work with like mental health professionals to kind of navigate that because, you know, they may have situations where they're doing this nesting situation and then maybe the other parent starts dating someone. So they have to navigate those issues and they might want a mental health professional to kind of work with them to kind of navigate those particular issues.
Yeah, it's hard to see everything that might be coming up when you're in the middle of something at the time, for sure.
Right. And I think ideally, initially, it's easy, but then when other parties get involved, they may,
Mm.
if someone's dating someone new, they might say, "What is this crazy situation? You go back to your marital home 3 days a week, and then you go and live in this garden apartment the other 4 days a week. And how can you?" I think the commentary or, your parents might say, "Why are you doing this?" But people are, and I think it could really work in situations where you have kids who have special needs and really cannot
Mhm.
have a lot of transition in their lives. Like I have had parents of, in particular, like kids who have special needs do scenarios like this. And they're really, first of all, they're special people because they're helping, they're the parents of a special needs child and they're really putting their child's needs ahead of everything else in their life. And you really have to give them a lot of credit for being able to do things like that.
I love that. Well, as we wrap up today's episode, in litigation, a judge decides the fate of the parties. In mediation, the parties themselves decide their own fate. So, why is it that agency is so important for a person's emotional recovery?
So I believe that because agency is taking responsibility for your own actions and your own transition in life. And most cases don't go to trial. So I do want to kind of say that just because you're in a litigation doesn't mean you're going to have a trial. Most cases are resolved by agreement. So whether it be through mediation or through reaching a written agreement in a case in the litigated process, people are able to always take responsibility for their own lives. It's only these very, very contentious cases that end up going to trial and where you're just kind of putting your hands up and saying, I can't make a decision. I need somebody else to make it for me. And usually they don't. I think most people who, after a trial, get the judge's decision, they're not going to be happy, because I think being part of your life is just an important thing for all of us. I mean, nobody wants, their father to say, you have to go to medical school and you're going to be a doctor. I mean, people want to have a say in what kind of career they choose and how they're going to live and how they're going to be involved in their children's lives. So if you can kind of step back and realize you are going to have to make a compromise. This is an agreement with another person, usually a person you've been married to. It could have been a short-term marriage, it could have been a long-term marriage, but you need to be involved in that process, because even though you may not want to make a decision and you want this person in a black robe to make it for you, you're most likely not going to be happy with how they rule in your case. And I would never, want a third party to make a decision about my life. I don't think most people would.
I tend to agree. Well, that is it for today's episode of Your Next Best Chapter, a Central New Jersey divorce and family law podcast. If you'd like to learn more about LauraD'Orsi and her family law practice, you can visit LauraD'OrsiLaw.com. There you'll find helpful information about divorce, custody, and other family law matters in New Jersey. And thank you for listening. Remember to subscribe, leave a review, and share the show with anyone that may be navigating this process so that they can find clear, steady guidance. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.